Good morning. For those who might be watching this at other times, today is the Sunday before Mardi Gras here in the New Orleans area. Before I begin and we'll talk a little about Mardi Gras today, I'd like to ask if you like what you're hearing, the messages that we are sending out there. I ask you to please subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. We're hoping to grow to help us get out that message of love that we talk about here at Unity of Metairie out there into a world that we really believe needs love in order to deal with all the fear that is out there in the world today. So today I'm going to talk about Mardi Gras, but I'm going to talk about a specific aspect because there are so many concepts of Mardi Gras here in the New Orleans area that we go on and on about. There's the Mardi Gras Indians, the skeletons, the whole idea of a king cake and braids and all these symbols and purple, green, and gold, which when it's coming out is what I'm wearing here. But what I want to talk about today is more of the roots of Mardi Gras and how it's truly connected to spirituality and really connected to the day and weeks that follow, which is known as Lent. Mardi Gras, because one of the questions people ask is, why don't they just pick a date? How come Mardi Gras is on a different day every year? The reason for that is Easter is on a different day every year. And the way Easter is decided on is a simple formula. Well, it's simple if you can figure it out. Easter is always the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox.
Oh my gosh.
So if there's a full moon right after the spring equinox, that's why Mardi Gras is early and Easter's early. If there's a full moon right before the spring equinox, then Mardi Gras and Easter will be late that year. We don't have to worry about it because a monk in the 4th or 5th century figured it out for hundreds and hundreds of years in the future. So those dates are pretty well set. But that's why it moves around. And there was a movement a few years ago in New Orleans to set a date for the tourists. But the people here said, no. Because the whole reason for Mardi Gras is its connection to Lent and to Easter. And that dates back centuries. In ancient times, in Rome especially, there were spring and fertility celebrations that were very raucous and complete celebrations and drunkenness. Yeah, it sounds like Mardi Gras today. Called Saturnalia and Lupercalia. And when Rome and the parts of Europe became Christian, what happened is, instead of trying to end these celebrations, some say, well, the church stole them. That's one of the Wiccan concepts is Christianity stole all our rituals and celebrations. But no, the people, as they converted to Christianity, kept the things they were celebrating. They just saw them in a different light. And Mardi Gras, or Fat Tuesday, is one of those celebrations. So they incorporated into their new faith into the day before Lent started. And it was a day where they would celebrate because they were getting ready to enter a season of fasting and things like that. So they would eat all the meat they had in the house and get rid of and eat all the fatty stuff and the stuff that they would be giving up during Lent and celebrate and sometimes overindulge to get rid of this stuff instead of wasting it in preparing themselves for the next day. So the excess of Mardi Gras season is that preparation for Lent in the Christian tradition, which is where Mardi Gras comes from. I think it's funny that so many Christian churches now condemn it. And one of the goals I've had for years is, I'm not going to let anybody take away our traditions. And this is one of those. So they would use up all the meat and fats in preparation for the fasting and abstinence in Lent. And Mardi Gras is the French version of this. There's other versions, we have Carnival and all that. That's just the same concept, but coming through other traditions, where here in Louisiana, a lot of our traditions are French. Now, just as a point of history, there's always been a big debate between New Orleans and Mobile, Alabama, of where did Mardi Gras begin. And there is some historical facts, but I'll say ahead of time, New Orleans did a lot more with it than Mobile did. First of all, one of the jokes I love, and you can plug in a lot of cities, and I'll just pick on New York. Do you know what they call Mardi Gras in New York? Tuesday. The first celebration of Mardi Gras dates back to March 3rd, which would have been Fat Tuesday of that year, 1699. When Iberville camped and his group that was beginning to explore the Mississippi River, they camped 60 miles downriver from what would become New Orleans and named it Point du Mardi Gras, or Mardi Gras Point. It's still named that today. And because it was Mardi Gras, they had a feast or a gala that day. So that's considered the first Mardi Gras celebration in America. But New Orleans didn't exist yet. But in 1702, Bienville founded the settlement of Mobile. But it was set up as the capital of French Louisiana. Louisiana at that time, French Louisiana, ran all along the Gulf Coast into the panhandle of Florida. So Mobile can claim it, but it was Louisiana that started. So I know they'll have other people will say, wait a minute, but it was part of Louisiana. Then in 1703, the first Mardi Gras tradition began in Mobile. The city of New Orleans was founded in 1718. And then, being French there too, the Mardi Gras tradition continued. And back then it was mainly parties, balls, feasting, galas, and things like that. The first parade in New Orleans was in 1857. And it has grown since then, many, many, many times. One of the things about Mardi Gras in the old tradition was it was a day to kind of free yourself from rules and social structures. For those who are Jungian and believe in things Jung wrote, it was a day to look at your shadow side and give it a little freedom. So it can be released and experienced and then put back in the box if it has to for the rest of the year. In fact, I was reading a bunch of interviews of people who come here every year, and many of them are like teachers and things like this who live a very simple, conservative life. They come to New Orleans once a year, put on a mask, and that's what masks are for, to hide your identity, and just let loose. And they say that it allows them to go back home and live that level life again because they're given release to their shadow side and given it an opportunity to be expressed. And so it's not sneaking up, as Jung would say, if we don't recognize it, it's going to sneak up and appear at the most inopportune times. But that's just as an aside, because that's just one aspect. But where Mardi Gras fits in to, I think, spirituality, remember this is a Christian celebration, so it's filled with those Christian imageries, is that when Jesus turned 30, before he began his ministry of teaching, he went into the desert for 40 days to fast and to pray. And at the end of that 40 days, in the Gospel of Matthew and Luke, we read about the temptations of Jesus. And these temptations dealt around food, drink, material wealth, and power, which Jesus said no to, and then proceeded in his ministry of teaching, the teaching of love and all that we've come to know, that what Jesus actually taught. And I'll get back to that series next time on the universal truth that Jesus actually taught. But it's that 40 days of fasting and abstinence and prayer that became important. And that is the root of the 40 days of Lent. Now, just as an aside, Lent is a little more than 40 days if you count the Sundays, because Sundays are not considered part of Lent. And Ash Wednesday is decided by starting with Easter, counting backwards, not counting Sundays to the 40th day. That's Ash Wednesday, and the day before, of course, is Mardi Gras. So those ideas of things that we can be tempted with, and I say tempted because I agree with what Paul says in Romans. Paul never mentions a devil or anything like that out there tempting us. Paul says in Romans, sin is that thing that resides in us. That anything that might get us off the path or miss the mark or cause us to not love as we should stems from inside of us, from each of us. It's ourselves. It's not some external power dangling a carrot in front of us. It's something inside of us that we need to look at and to accept. And that's what Lent is. That's what it was originally meant to be. So the day before Lent, people said, well, we're getting ready to fast and abstain, so let's celebrate, let's party, let's have some fun, let's overeat, possibly overdrink, and just let it all out so then we can settle down for Lent. And that's some of what we see in the Mardi Gras traditions. And there's three main ones that, for me, tie very much into this idea of how can Mardi Gras be seen as part of my spirituality. First are the beads and throws and doubloons. People go nuts grabbing these things. I've seen people pushed down and hurt because somebody was grabbing a bead or a doubloon. For those who don't know, doubloons are aluminum discs that so many of the braves throw. And these are the riches and treasures that people seek. And they fight for it, and they bring it home. And they're all proud of, look at all the stuff I got. And the next day, it's worthless. In fact, there's another old joke in New Orleans. You know why the houses in New Orleans sink? All the Mardi Gras beads in the attic. So this thing that was desired, this symbol of wealth, the next day becomes worthless. Then food. Down here in New Orleans, food is a big part of our culture, of our life. But Mardi Gras, I mean, people are barbecuing, they're ordering fried chicken days ahead of time, and they overeat and they overdrink, and they feel full. The next day, they wake up, they're hungry, or possibly hungover. And the reality sets in that, no, food doesn't last either. It's a fleeting thing that we got to do regularly, but there's not complete fulfillment in that. And the big part of Mardi Gras is the royalty. The kings and queens of the different crews. They rule that parade. Rex rules Mardi Gras Day, rules the city. In fact, the mayor gives a proclamation every Mardi Gras when Rex is in front of City Hall, turning the city over to his rule. Actually, it takes place on Monday when he lands, and he gives him the city. He's the ruler of the city until the next day, when that power is gone. Power doesn't last either. So 3 of the big symbols of Mardi Gras are just that. Food, beads, and royalty are big on that day. The next day, they don't matter anymore. And Ash Wednesday, we begin to see that these things really don't fill us. They don't fulfill us. And that sets us to a point of saying, okay, what are the things I need to do to find more fulfillment in my life? To find more sense of my true self. Since these physical things, they don't matter anymore. And that's where the tradition in Lent of praying, fasting, and almsgiving comes about. Fasting is part of many, many, many religious traditions. Fasting could be not eating at all, or limiting your eating, or what's known as abstinence, of just giving up certain things. And one of the premises behind that is it creates a hunger that we then can fill with something else, or in a sense in the spiritual of finding something beyond the food or the drink to fill us. And that's the essence of what fasting is all about. And it's a practice that I do pretty regularly, just to set myself, or sometimes to reset myself on what is really important. And that's very much tied in, because very often growing up, all we heard is, what are you going to give up for Lent? What are you going to give up for Lent? But it's deeper than that. It's giving up something that really means something to us, that we may say, you know, that's not as important as I thought it was, or maybe I need to lead that to another direction. There's just so many different ways of looking at it, but fasting is one of those ways to help us to get there. The other one is prayer and meditation. Because during this time, and by the way, this doesn't just have to happen at Mardi Gras Wednesday and Lent. This can happen anytime in our lifetime, anytime during the year. But to then take extra time to meditate, to reflect on what is really important in my life. What are those things I can let go of, using the phrase that don't serve us anymore? And what can I replace that with that will bring me to higher consciousness, to bring me to a greater life of love? And then almsgiving. And one of the traditions is, Let's say I decide to abstain from 3 lunches a week. That every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I won't eat lunch. Instead of that time where I would eat lunch, I'll spend that time meditating and praying. And if I don't eat lunch 3 days a week, I save a little money. Then I take that money and donate it to my favorite charity, which is an expression of love. So in the Christian tradition, prayer, fasting, and almsgiving are very much tied together. But they're tied together in that sense to help the individual to grow in their spirituality, in their consciousness, and just in their life in general. And these are just 3 tools that can be used that are very, very, very much a part of our spiritual growth, our spiritual toolbox, or whatever. Things we can use to help us on the way. And that's what I see the importance of Mardi Gras has become in my life. Not just a celebration, not just parades and parties, but that they can have a deeper meaning in our lives as we celebrate this day of festivities. But it is a day of fun, and we can't forget that either. Just because you're spiritual, don't mean you can't have fun. I hate it when I hear religions talk about you can't do anything fun because if it's fun or enjoyable, it's a sin. No. We can have fun. We can dance. We can second line. And for those who don't know what second lining is, it might be something you look up on Google. Those of us in New Orleans, though, because, well, I'll tell you what it is. A lot of people, as a band, is marching. They like that band. So you have the parade, you have the crowd, and behind the crowd, you have the second line of people who are dancing and following that particular band. So second lining became dancing to the music. And we can have fun. And Mardi Gras is a time to enjoy. But also, it can be a time that we can reflect and say, okay, I'm having fun today. But it's going to end. The fun's going to end. I'm going to eat more than I need to. I may drink a little more than I need to. Or maybe in the French Quarter be doing some things that I wouldn't normally do. The next day, we can say, okay, that was fun, but where do I go from here? But I like to end, I found this quote, because Mardi Gras is a time of fun and joy, and we need to do that. Our life needs to have that too. This is a quote, and her name is Emily Richards. I looked her up. She's a romance novel mystery writer who did live for a short time in New Orleans, and I'm assuming this might be a quote from one of her books. I'd like to end with it because it says, Mardi Gras is the love of life. It is the harmonic convergence of our food, our music, our creativity, our eccentricity, our neighborhoods, and our joy of living, all at once. But at the same time, it can lead us to something deeper and something that can enrich our lives. And that's why I see the importance of Mardi Gras and of celebrating it, and also asking ourselves, can this celebration also lead me to a deeper understanding of myself and maybe where I need to go to grow in all those aspects of my life that I want to grow. Amen. Blessed be. Namaste.